Sir Alf Ramsey is the only manager to win England the World Cup. But if we restarted his career at his first club, Ipswich, could he go on to surpass his real-life legacy? The thing is, he only won 2 major trophies in his actual career. One of them, of course, being the World Cup, but that's worth at least 10 Premier Leagues and 3 Champions Leagues. In Season 1, he takes Ipswich to 5th in the Championship, but lost to QPR in the playoff semi-finals. In reality, he took Ipswich from Division 3 to Division 1 champions in 7 seasons. I wonder if he can do that in-game. Well, in Season 2, Ipswich dropped back slightly to 8th place, meaning that they miss out on the playoffs. And in Season 3, Alf gets sacked. But Ipswich kept getting worse after he left the club. But that was almost the end of Alf Ramsey, because he doesn't get another job for 4 seasons until Plymouth decide to take him on. He did a good job with them, taking them up to 7th place in League One, but just missing out on the playoffs by goal difference. But 363 days after joining Plymouth, he was sacked again. Plymouth had been predicted to finish in 5th place, but Alf was sacked after a terrible start to the season and they never recovered, finishing rock bottom. This hasn't been a good start to Alf's career. In reality, he'd already won the first division with Ipswich at this point and was on the cusp of being made the England manager. Back in game, and Alf had caught the eye of Middlesbrough, and he took them to a stable mid-table finish in the Championship. Interesting how he had a poor season at Plymouth and then fell upwards into the Championship. Not that it matters though, because just a year later, he again had been sacked. This manager career milestone page does not look particularly good. The sacking was justified though, it was their lowest point of the season. Alf's next job is with Everton, where out of nowhere he gets them promoted via the playoffs back to the Premier League. This is a man who's had 3 sackings to his name, has never won anything, and yet is now in the Premier League. For just 1 season, as Everton get relegated by 8 points. But at least Alf Ramsey is still in charge. Well, after a poor start to the new season, Alf was sacked early doors. But again, he fell upwards because Wolverhampton Wanderers took him on as their manager and he promptly got them relegated, finishing 19th in the table. However, in a shock turn of events, Alf decides to leave Wolves of his own accord to join Brighton instead and get them relegated from the Premier League by finishing 10 points away from safety. Alf is basically the reverse Sam Allardyce. Sam Allardyce comes into any club that needs to be saved from relegation, whereas Alf comes in because the managers are desperate for those parachute payments. This time though, he does stick it out with Brighton and finishes in 2nd place in the Championship to get back promoted to the Premier League. His main striker, by the way, is a 32-year-old Endrick. But even Endrick can't help Alf, as he gets sacked early into the new season after losing the confidence of the dressing room. They were also rock bottom of the table at the time, so that didn't really help either. Honestly, I don't think we've had a more miserable simulation than this. Alf is a World Cup winner in real life, but in Football Manager, he just can't seem to do anything. So maybe England isn't right for him. He takes a year out, and at the start of season 19, he becomes the manager of Arminia Bielefeld, taking them to 12th place in the Bundesliga, which looks pretty good, until he realised that last season they came in 4th place. It meant they were in the Champions League this season, and they came 18th in the league phase, qualifying for the playoff knockout round, where they unfortunately lost to Bayern Munich. Surprisingly, Alf lasts the entire 2nd season as he takes the team to 12th in the table again. However, he drops to 15th the season afterwards. So surely at this point he is on the edge of being sacked. He's taken this team from the Champions League to almost being relegated. But perhaps for the first time in his career, he turns it around. The following season, he's up to 9th place in the table, just missing out on European football. Does this mean he has finally turned a corner in his career? Well, maybe not, because the next season, they drop back down to 14th in the table. I don't get why though, because at this stage of his career, his attributes are insanely good. And maybe he's realised this as well, because he's finally qualified for a European competition by coming in 7th place in the Bundesliga. This has to be the turning point for his career now. Or not, as he drops back down to 14th again. I really just want to hit my head against the wall. But in the league phase of the Conference League, they actually topped the table. They then beat Cypriot side AEK Larnakas in the round of 16, but got knocked out at the quarter-final stage. This was their competition to win. How have they been knocked out? The yo-yo journey continues as Alf finishes 8th the following season, just missing out on European football, before yo-yoing down to 13th in season 27. Somehow he's made it to his 10th season as the manager of Arminia Bielefeld, but he's come in 12th place, which really just sums up his lackluster career so far. There is good news though, because next season he's back in European football following a 7th place finish in the Bundesliga. And it could have been the Champions League had they just won a couple more games. This good finish acts as a springboard as next season they finish in 6th place, qualifying for next season's Europa League. But of course this season they are in the Europa Conference League, and they came 4th in a very competitive field. In the round of 16 they beat Hungarian side Ferencváros comfortably, but once again bottled the quarterfinals, this time losing to AC Milan. Only in Football Manager can you go from Hull City to PSG as the champions of the Conference League. The following season he can't quite replicate the 6th place finish, but does now have some consistency in top 7 finishes. Of course this season they were in the Europa League, and they won every single game in the league phase, finishing just behind Aston Villa on goals scored. They beat Olympiacos in the round of 16, but once again he falls in the quarterfinals, this time to Udinese. 13 seasons at Arminia Bielefeld have resulted in 0 cup finals, let alone any trophies. But he has delivered some consistency in recent seasons, and for some clubs, that's quite important. So at the end of the season, he resigns from the club to become the Portugal manager. Yes, this is a very bizarre career move, but I'm all for it. He has a near perfect World Cup qualification, with the only blip being a draw against Austria. Maybe the 2054 World Cup in Spain is his time to shine. Portugal topped the 3-team group stage with wins over Australia and Mali. Jamaica are no match in the second round, and Croatia crumble in the third round. Alf has never got past the quarterfinals in any competition in his career, but he finally has done now, thanks to a 1-0 win over the Netherlands, which put them against Brazil in the semi-finals, which they went on to win. This set up a final against bitter rivals and host nation Spain. Portugal opened up the scoring inside of 15 minutes and they looked in control, until centre mid Hugo Cortinas got sent off just before half-time. This allowed Spain back into the game as they scored an equaliser on the 57th minute, and the score stayed level at 90 minutes and 120 minutes, meaning the World Cup final was going to penalties. Spain stepped up, but Portugal's keeper Hugo Conceição made a huge save that allowed Portugal to take the lead. Spain scored their second penalty, and so did Portugal. Both sides were also able to put away their third penalty, meaning Portugal were 3-2 up. However, once again, Hugo Conceição saved Spain's fourth penalty, giving Quaresma the chance to win Portugal and Alf Ramsey the World Cup. That might have been the worst penalty I have ever seen. But they could still win it if Hugo Conceição saved Spain's final penalty. And he did. Portugal have won the World Cup and Alf has his first ever trophy. It's actually remarkable how he's won the World Cup in real life and in game. Next up are the 2056 Euros, which Portugal don't need to qualify for because they're hosting it. However, the group stage isn't as straightforward, but 2 draws and a win were enough to qualify. They had to go to extra time to beat Turkey in the second round, but they beat Spain in 90 minutes in the quarterfinals before qualifying for another final by beating Belgium in the semis. This time they were taking on France. Both teams had great chances to win the game, but it eventually finished 0-0 after 90 minutes and 0-0 after 120 minutes, meaning we were going to go to another penalty shootout. This time there aren't any big saves from Hugo Conceição, as both teams hammer home their penalties until we get to Portugal's 6th penalty, which is saved. It wasn't quite to be for Alf in the Euros. He did go and get revenge for that cup final though by beating France in the UEFA Nations League final, of course on penalties. This is surely a pretty good sign for the 2058 World Cup, and qualifying went incredibly well. But the actual World Cup, didn't. After struggling past Barbados and Nigeria, Portugal lost in the second round to England, which was also Alf's last game. It's actually kind of poetic that his final game is against England. At the age of 70, Alf was ready to retire, and I don't really know what to make of his career. On the one hand, he was a manager for 36 seasons, which is very impressive, but he only won 2 trophies, and of course one of them was the World Cup, but he was rubbish across all of his clubs. For me, that means he had a better career in real life than he did in game, but because he won a World Cup in both, he's got to go down as a legend. And he's not the only legend that we've simulated. Bill Shankly is one of Liverpool's greatest ever managers, who won an awful lot with them. But could he have a better career in Football Manager than he did in real life? Well, to find out, the video is on screen for you right now.